Hey guys, what's up? Yeah, it's a little dark in here, and it's because, well, it had just been storming a little while ago, and I think the rain's going to be coming back soon. And please forgive the noise in the background. Somebody apparently is mowing the lawns out there, so yeah, can't really do much about that. And no, I'm not going to make it brighter in here. I kind of like the light the way it is right now. I don't know, call me romantic or something. I don't know, mood lighting. Anyway, I guess it's about time I made a more serious video, right? And I did promise something on religion, so here goes. Got a friend of mine. I got a couple of religious friends. They happen to know my viewpoints, but we get along just fine. It's because they tend to be a little bit more sane than, well, the problems, right? Sorry, Skype. A little while ago, one of my Christian friends put up an interesting little post up on Facebook. You know, those little meme type pictures with text in there trying to prove some type of point. You know, we see it all the time, the political ones, or the religious ones, or the social ones, whatever, right? This one I thought was rather interesting, though, because it got me thinking about a few things. I don't know, maybe you guys have seen this one already, maybe you haven't. It's this one picture showing some dude in the desert. I guess he's supposed to represent Moses or something, looking kind of confused, like, huh? With lambs behind them and such. And on the top of the picture, it says, in the beginning, I created the universe from a singularity, in which all the energy and matter was compressed in a hyperheated state, with all three interactions of the standard model merged into one single interaction, characterized by one larger gauge symmetry and thus unified coupling constant. Look, never mind. Let me rephrase all that. In the beginning, I created the heavens and the earth. I think you get the point and the joke of this. Like, he's God's trying to explain this to, I guess, Moses or whoever, the earlier people, and they just look. So he said, you know what? No, forget all that. In the beginning, I created the heavens and the earth. And the text that goes with this picture, besides the text that's in the picture, it's a quote from a reverend, and he basically says, should a priest reject relativity because it contains no authoritative exposition on the doctrine of the Trinity? Once you realize that the Bible does not purport to be a textbook of science, the old controversy between religion and science vanishes. The doctrine of the Trinity is much more abstruse than anything in relativity or quantum mechanics, but being necessary for salvation, the doctrine is stated in the Bible. If the theory of relativity had also been necessary for salvation, it would have been revealed to St. Paul or to Moses. As a matter of fact, neither St. Paul nor Moses had the slightest idea of relativity. And this was from Reverend Monsignor Georges Lemaitre, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. Could be wrong, but that's the way it looks to me. Lemaitre. Lemaitre? Something like that. Anyway, now, I can sort of appreciate the sentiment here, in that the Reverend, and of course my friend posting this up, because he has argued this with me before, that, there's no reason why religion and science can't coincide. That's basically the argument. And I'm sure we've heard this argument many times before in different forms, that religion is only concerned with matters of the soul, spiritual things, and science is concerned with the nuts and bolts of how the world works around us, and there's no reason why the two can't coincide. Furthermore, the Reverend is saying that, look, for anybody who's trying to argue about why, the Bible doesn't, explain things scientifically, or for those of you who are trying to say that, or we claim that this explains things scientifically, he's saying, no, the Bible never purports to do that. And, quite frankly, it's ridiculous to think that. It's not a scientific textbook. He at least admits that. It's not a scientific textbook. It's about salvation. It's about the soul. And, we're not concerned with things like quantum mechanics, so that's why it's not in there. There's a problem with this. Okay, on one hand, again, I am not going to necessarily slam, well, okay, I'm going to point out the flaws, but I understand what he's trying to do here. The more sane among the devout understand that you just are not, you just can't really go around saying that scientific discoveries are completely false and expect to be taken seriously by anybody with two brain cells to rub together. I wouldn't even be able to make this freaking video if it weren't for certain scientific principles that probably go against what religious people think about the world around them. Period. Uh, so a religious person, a reverend no less, basically going around saying, hey, the Bible doesn't say it's a scientific textbook, so stop saying that. Well, that's not really what he's saying. It's more of a defensive stance. And it's more like he's saying that, look, a priest should never, he's even saying that, no, we shouldn't be rejecting relativity. We should accept it. Just realize it has nothing to do with what we're doing. Okay, fine. But there's at least two major problems with this statement. The first problem is that it's not the non-believers or the naysayers or the atheists, those being critical. It's not those people going around saying that the Bible claims to be a scientific textbook and that explains everything. It's the believers that are going around saying that this book explains everything. And it's not just a few scant individuals, going around saying crazy things. And it's not just some, crazy street preacher in the, somewhere screaming that you better repent or you're going to burn in hell. No, we got organizations out there who are being financed to push forth the agenda that things in the Bible can be explained scientifically and that the Bible itself explains the way things are. You wouldn't have organizations like Answers in Genesis if this wasn't true. Okay? It's not, Answers in Genesis is not an atheist organization. It's a Christian one. And their goal is simple. To prove that everything in the Bible happened, it's scientific fact. Things like Noah's Ark, things and the flood, things like, Adam and Eve being the very first human beings, things like the world only, this planet only being 6,000 years old. They're trying to prove that shit is real. And again, these are moneyed organizations. Worse yet, we have, in the United States, we have senators who believe this shit being voted by other religious people who believe this stuff. And this is the agenda. That's the doctrine you're pushing. You wouldn't have people trying to, put creationist crap in schools if this wasn't an agenda that Christians were pushing. They're the ones going around saying that this Bible is correct as is. It's not just a spiritual text. It is supposedly a factual text. Factual and scientific statements, factual and historical statements. Everything we want to know about the truth is in the Bible. It's the answer to everything. You want to know everything about how the world works? Bible. You want to know what happened in history in the past? Bible. You want to have the answer to all your problems? Bible. You want to be able to cure acne? Bible. That's the book that they point to as the answer for all their freaking problems. So if you're going to be making this argument about, rejecting relativity, whether it's concerned with the soul or not, you need to make that to your congregation, not the rest of us. The rest of us we know the score. We know this book isn't factually correct. That's our problem with it. And our biggest problem is that people among the devout are trying to say that it is, and then attacking other people for pointing out that it's not. So to the reverend and anybody else in a position of leadership that's going to be making this argument that he is, you need to beat the crap out of your congregation until they get the point. Look, you guys are fucking shit up for us, because the more they keep pushing this stuff, the more they're going to make your religion look ridiculous. And quite frankly, with some of the stuff in the dogma, it's already doing a really good job of that on its own. The other problem I see with this is that even the Bible itself, just the nature of the doctrine itself, basically suggests that, yes, the Bible is itself purporting to be not necessarily, I won't necessarily say it's a textbook on science. It's not. And I do agree with the Reverend on this. And my friend, of course, if he posted this up, he obviously agrees with the sentiment. It doesn't, it's not necessarily, the book doesn't come out and say that, look, this is a book of science. However, the way it is portrayed, both the way it is written as well as how it is being, given to people by the religious, you get the sense that that's what it is supposed to be, this book that explains the world around them. If this book, let's put it another way, if this book was only concerned with matters of the soul, then why bother coming up with a creation story where you claim that the sky is a solid object, that the stars and moon and stuff happen to be firmly painted on that and happens to revolve around the earth? The firmament, remember that? That's in there. That really has nothing to do with the soul, right? But it's in there. It's explaining something. The origin story of Adam and, the beginning with Adam and Eve and the snake being tempted, it suggested that the reason why the snake has no legs is because God cursed him for telling Eve that he can eat the fruit, because she could eat the fruit. The explanation for why women have pain during childbirth. Oh, God cursed her for sinning. These explanations aren't spiritual explanations. This is why the world is the way it is. Now, granted, somebody who is a little bit more educated in lore and myth and storytelling will be able to look at this and see it for what it is. Old myths do this all the time. But somebody who's going to be taking this as fact, that they're completely devout, this is the way it happened, that's the way they're going to push it. And if you're going to be pushing it that way, then yeah, you are making this out to be something that scientifically happened. The people who are arguing that the world is only 6,000 years old are doing so because of adding up the years that were in the Bible. It's not the critics doing that. This is what needs to be addressed. And interestingly enough, part of the problem with this is, and this is what I'm finding to be an interesting conundrum, the religious people I know who are willing to admit that things in their religious texts aren't necessarily factual tend to not be as devout as the ones who are trying to push it to be fact. And that gets rather funny the more I see it, because they keep having to compromise what they're willing to believe with what they know. And the more they start educating themselves on facts, scientific facts, historical facts, the less religious they get. To the point where sooner or later they have that crisis of faith moment. There are those who, of course, who can hang on to their faith. And I know quite a few friends who do this. But I notice that the way they do it is by compartmentalizing. I'm using the word wrong, but it's like, look, my religion is over here, and what I know of the world is over here. And while I will live my life in a religious way, I try to keep what I believe separate from what I know. It's weird. You can kind of see the gears kind of like grinding against each other sometimes when you ask them certain questions. And it always ends up being, well, look, Lord works in mysterious ways, or I don't know why he does what he does. I wrestle with this all the time, but still, I know my God. It's like there's always this reprogramming thing going on, like reaffirming, look, I'm holding on to my religion, damn it. I know this other stuff is causing problems, making me think about this shit too much, but no, let me just know. I know this religion stuff works, I'm sticking with it. That's the way they feel, but there's always that conflict. Facts do that. It's the problem. When you're dealing with something that gets rid of notions that you want to dearly hold on to, you'll always have that conflict within your mind. But I focus on that one aspect of the problem with this. The other aspect of the problem with this is that people seem to forget what religion was for. And what religion was ultimately for, well, to put it in one word, it's control. But when you say that, people automatically think of, keep the weak-minded in line. That's a small part of it. Religion was made in the beginning to give a sense of order to human beings who wanted it. Human beings have a desperate need to make order out of anything. No matter how random or chaotic it is, we try to find a reason for it. We try to put an answer to it. We try to put it in some type of framework so that we can better digest it. It's one of the reasons why we get crazy conspiracy theories going around all the time on shit that just happens. Conspiracy theories many times are the result of people desperately trying to put some type of framework around something that they can't understand, or something that's just way beyond them. Even if the theory they come up with is horrifying, at least they're able to put a name to it, an order to it. Like someone orchestrated this, a group orchestrated this. This is why the things are the way they are. for things to be all willy-nilly. No, they can't. That's hard for human beings to deal with. And religion is an attempt to give primitive people at the time a sense of order. And it was a sense of order for everything. It's amazing to me how many people don't seem to understand that the 10 Commandments, or should I say actually the 613 Commandments, the book of Leviticus isn't just there for fun and games. Those were the real laws of the people. And that's the key. It's laws. This is not some separate list of things that you have to follow in order to get into heaven. And then meanwhile, you got all these other laws of your country. No, those were the laws of the country. People don't seem to understand that, especially religious people. It's funny to me how they don't seem to get that. Well, there are some people who are fighting to try to make religious law, actual country law, but I think, they're trying to make it like that again. I think they at least understand this scary thing, but that's one thing I know a lot. It goes over a lot of people's heads when they start talking about religious laws and dogma. Your religion was the way your country worked. Theocracies were the norm, because if you're trying to get a group of people together, primitive-minded people together, and when I'm saying primitive-minded, I'm not trying to put them down. I'm just saying they didn't know much about the world. Even the Reverend admits, Moses, these people, they have no clue what relativity was, much less coming up with any sense of, morality system for how to treat other human. I mean, they've got a simple morality system that's based on their God, but, coming up with thinking about, is it okay? Maybe it's not a good idea to own slaves. This is only early stages. They're not sophisticated enough yet to start thinking about these sorts of things. And you're trying to get these people in line with a sense of order, and you need to come up with a sense of authority, something to make them fall in line. Now you can go with the whole might makes right aspect, which in actuality, that's what religion ultimately is, because if you don't obey God, first of all, you have to obey God. Why? Because he's the mightiest. It comes down to that, really. He's the one who created everything. He's the one who can create and destroy with but a thought. You better do what he says or you're going to burn. That's pretty much might makes right. All this stuff about love and, I care about you. I want you to be with me in heaven. It's nice, but that's not the underlying thing here. The ultimate reason why you have to do what he says. The ultimate thing is that you have to do this because he's God. He's the mightiest. And the might makes right thing, though, is ultimately look, God said you need to do this ultimate powerful authority. God says you need to do this. He's the one who put these laws together. He's the one who set the structure up. Who you'd argue with him? Oh, and by the way, I happen to be pretty damn close to him, so as a proxy, you need to listen to me too. So you keep the people in line. All the laws in there, all those 613 commandments were the laws of that nation, mandated by their God. And this is where that argument about, well, all morality comes from God comes from. Because the laws came from there, the ethics came from, it's like everything supposedly goes back to him. It was hard, I guess, for people at that time to realize that they're the ones making it all up. Ultimately, authority comes from themselves. And even today, you have people having a hard time with that concept, which is why you still have this argument to this day. Where does your morality come from? It comes from us. We're the ones who, we decide morality all the freaking time. It changes over time. First, you fools thought it was no problem, owning people. Now we consider it abhorrent. Did God come out of somewhere and say that you need to stop being holding slaves? We came up with that shit. Morality and ethics ultimately comes from us. But religion says otherwise. Now, what does this have to do with the Bible being pushed as a scientific text? Well, if ultimate authority and the laws of the nation and everything ultimately come from their God, then that also means that the framework that they're creating, and they're doing it for control. Remember, the religion is all for control, and the book and the laws and everything is a way of helping to control those people and give them a sense of order. And part of giving people a sense of order is giving them a framework about the world around them, not just about their society. And that's why the book was written, well, the books were written the way they were. Explaining how the world works, why the stars are in the sky, why it seems like the earth is the center of everything, why it seems that man is able to lord over the other animals because God gave him the mandate to do it. He made Adam named all the animals and he gave him dominion over all things. It's a way of giving people a framework, a sense of order, a sense of structure. That's what religion does. That's ultimately what it means when they say that religion is to control people. It's not just this kind of maniacal, tyrant type of thing. Yes, that's part of it, but it's ultimately about giving people a framework to work under. And as I've said before, human beings usually don't like freedom anyway. You give them a strong enough leader that they're willing to follow, they'll jump over and follow him. There are very few individuals on this planet, true individuals on this planet, people who are willing to go their own way. When we find people like that, we tend not to like them very much. We think they're weird. We think they're crazy because they're not doing what everyone else is doing. Even those who go, I'm an individual. I notice the ones who scream that the most tend to be some of the biggest followers I've ever met. They're following some type of trend, or they're like hardcore in some type of philosophy, political or religious, you name it. They're really into that. Some of the biggest super independent types are those who just cannot think outside of the box that they've put themselves in. And they will not, because they've already been given a framework that they're willing to latch onto. They will not break those chains. Most people love the chains that they wear. There's a lot of chains that we put on ourselves that we wear willingly. It's just how human beings are. So with all that said, and I hope that jumble made some sort of sense, because I'm thinking back on it, I'm like, I wonder if I even made a point. Sorry. It's not that simple to just simply go, well, the Bible's all about salvation, and science is about the gears of things, and the two can be together. How the Bible's being used and how it's been written and how the religion has been portrayed for years goes against that thought. And you can't blame the critics for it. It's the followers you got to deal with. They're the ones pushing the problem. And it's sort of not their fault because that's the way the doctrine is being pushed. Ultimately, the religion is supposed to be the answer to everything. Now, those who are a bit more intellectually minded are trying to reconcile science with religion. And more power to them, I guess, but they're going to have a very hard battle on their hands because they're going to have to be able to do several things that I think they're very uncomfortable with. One, they're going to have to state that the Bible isn't factually correct. I noticed the Reverend did not go that far to say that. Now, he's saying, oh, it's concerned with salvation. That's a nice little step around the issue here, that the Bible's actually wrong about a whole lot of things. For them to admit that it's wrong is to then admit that either God was wrong or the people who wrote the book were wrong, which then throws away the whole divinely inspired thing that they like throwing around all the time. This throws a big monkey wrench in the plans, which means they're going to have to rethink the entire dogma, redo the entire way the religion is being portrayed. And I don't see them being willing to do that sort of work. Do you? As an aside, by the way, about how the things being portrayed, and God being wrong. Let's just say that again, it was mankind getting it all wrong, but they were somehow getting the sense from God, and God kind of told it to them in a simple way that they could understand. I don't buy that, because this is the same God who gave them a whole lot of complex rules on what type of incense to burn in a temple. Okay. You mean to tell me he couldn't take the time to tell them how the world works? I mean, I really think that with the way, even back then, human beings were very intelligent. Think about what people were able to do back then with metals. Just, I'm into swords, and I talk to people who are into swords, and I know some of you guys watching this right now are heavily into swords. You know how much stuff goes into forging the metals and swords? Like, coming up with bronze, working with brass, working with steel. Yes, this was the Bronze Age when they were coming up with this stuff, but just working with those weapons alone. That took a hell of a lot of discovery and tinkering and experimentation, a lot of work that got into making weapons like that. You had to be pretty damn smart to discover this stuff and figure this shit out. And to say nothing about how they built their temples. The architectural structures that they came up with at the time, that people are still marveling about to this day. People are still trying to figure out how the pyramids were made. People are still looking at the old ancient ruins in Sumeria or in Greece and such and go like, wow, this stuff is amazing for what they did back then. So if people back then were smart enough to put that stuff together, And not to mention the mathematics stuff that, was, being developed in Egypt and in Greece later on, the beginnings of modern math. You mean to tell me that God couldn't have thrown a couple of scientific facts their way? They seemed smart enough for it. They were smart enough for all the other stuff. They mapped out the freaking scars. They mapped out the freaking stars, for God's sakes. It's the expression. They built their pyramids and built certain structures around the constellations in the sky. That's pretty damn observant and pretty damn intelligent. I don't think that they're too stupid to have been given some other scientific facts if it was portrayed to them in the right way. And so I think it's a bit of a cop-out to then say, oh, God was dealing with simple people, so you couldn't do that. Bullshit. This is another flaw with this argument. But I'm really rambling now. I need to wrap this up. One, again, they got to rethink. Just to say that, okay, maybe the Bible wasn't getting this right. That throws a huge monkey wrench in their plans. If you want to reconcile science and that's one thing you got to do, and I don't think they're willing to do that. Another thing they're going to have to be willing to do is to step away from everyday affairs that have to do with facts. If the Bible and the religion is only concerned with the soul, then that means that they're not concerned with everyday workings of life. So scientific, factual information, they need to stay the hell away from. If they truly believe that, our religion, the Bible's about salvation, science is about science, then that means that the religious people should have no fucking place in the debate about whether there's climate change or not. They shouldn't be trying to change what's written in scientific textbooks on, whether creationism is real or not. That's not their place then, is it? It's not their place to try to manipulate political processes to try to push their particular view of how the world works. They shouldn't even be dealing with things like economics or, political discussions, because again, all they're concerned with was the salvation of the soul. Let's see how far that goes. Let me see if, I would love to add, if the referendum was in front of me right now, I'd say, so are you willing to go that far? Step away from the political process, step away from, discussions on the scientific findings of whether there's climate change or not, and that the world really isn't 6,000 years old, and maybe even stepping away from historical stuff as well, because history these days is actually being, discovered. Like, true historians are basically doing this through the scientific process. Like, they're looking in the past and finding evidence for things that happened in the past before they then say this is what happened. And a lot of these things go against what's in the Bible too. Like, for instance, it shocks a lot of people to know that the Jews never were slaves in Egypt. Blows people's freaking minds, but it's true. So that means that the Bible got that wrong factually in history. Are you willing to go that far to admit that? Do you realize how much damage could be done to your religion if you just to say that they even got the facts on the history wrong, which they did? You'd be opening up a huge can of worms if you truly want to say that, this is just concerned with the soul. You'd have to throw out a whole lot of crap that you've been sitting on and taking advantage of for years. You'd have to throw, hell, the whole thing about this Bible being the center of your entire life is no longer valid once you want to go down the path of this is just concerned with your soul. And let science explain scientific stuff, and let history explain historical stuff. There's a lot of power you'd be giving up. And I don't think religious leaders want to give that power up. This went longer than I wanted. I'm sorry, it's such a rant. Catch you guys later.